We're good.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Please excuse the delays as we're trying to get up and running for our Thursday, August 11th Transportation Planning Committee meeting. Council is technically on vacation this week, so we're all in scattered parts. Staff is too, and we're all trying to get in on our mobile devices, and sometimes it doesn't work as easily as we'd hoped it would, so forgive the delay. I'm Julie Eisel, Chair of the Transportation and Planning Committee, and I have some of my committee members online as well, some in the room. I'll go ahead and turn it over to the room and introduce yourselves first, and then we'll go with our online participants and council members.
Larkin Eggleston, Committee Vice Chair.
Braxton Winston, Committee Member.
Liz Babson, City Manager's Office.
Yolanda Jones, Planning.
Ryan Wozniak, Planning.
Tim Porter, Urban Forestry.
Andrew, also Planning.
Tamara Blue, Transportation.
Kevin May, Planning Staff.
Laura Harmon, Planning Staff.
Robin Byers, Planning Staff.
Alicia Osborne, Planning Staff.
Sandra Montgomery, Planning.
Rebecca Hefner, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
Good morning, everyone. Debbie Smith with CDOT.
Jason Lawrence, Charlotte Area Transit System. Ed McKinney, CDOT.
Great, and who do we have joining us on our line? Do we have any committee members first?
Victoria Watlington.
Thank you, and I know Mr. Graham is trying to get on. He too is having technical difficulties.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Graham, I think, is unable to get on any of his devices, so he's watching on live stream and going to send us a message if he has any questions or comments.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I know he's moving his daughter today, so good. We wish Mr. Graham best of luck with that. What other council members? I know we have the mayor online. Thank you for joining us, Mayor. And how about other council members?
Ed Driggs, Council District 7.
Dimple Archmero, at-large member.
Okay. Any other staff or participants online?
Allison Craig, Interim Planning Director.
Thank you. With that, we've got today 2 items. The first is a UDO update that Allison Craig and Laura Harmon are going to give us. And then the second is the 2040 Comprehensive Plan implementation update. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allison Craig to jump right in.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
This is Watlington. I just want to make sure, I did, and I don't know, forgive me if this is not necessarily the appropriate time, but I just wanted to make sure that I added in here, I would like to add to the discussion a potential amendment to the UDO at the end of this.
Okay. Why don't we do that after Allison's presentation? That's
Perfect.
good.
Yep,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Chair and Vice Chair and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to be before you all today to give you an update on the UDO. This is an update. It's a really important one. It's in advance of the release of the adoption draft and in advance of the upcoming council vote on the 22nd. This is a really important body of work as it modernizes regulations all crafted at different times over the last 30 years. Is an important tool in implementing our city's comprehensive 2040 plan, our vision for growth, and what our city is going to look like. It advances council priorities, bringing better housing opportunities, equitable and safe mobility options, protects and enhances our natural environment, supports economic opportunities, and helps retain neighborhood character. There's a number of new tools in the UDO that I'm really excited about. I can't really get to all of them, but I'll hit a couple highlights. There's new overlays that helps empower the community to establish neighborhood-specific controls. We've got real affordable housing incentives that are in the draft that have been tested to be truly effective and incentivizing more production of affordable housing units, which is critically needed in our community. It's an important complement to the work that CDOT's doing with a comprehensive transportation review and really starting to talk about moving people and less so about moving cars. It strengthens our tree canopy, removing exemptions that exist in the ordinance today. So tree say would be required throughout all of our zoning districts. There's new street planting requirements, so that our street tree planting requirements, so that our sidewalks are tree lined, and it has built-in conflict resolution. There's a number of other important things the UDO is bringing, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of those. If you can go to the next slide. There's a long history with this work. We started in 2016 with a contract with Camiris, and that was approved, and that's when the Ordinance Advisory Committee was established. So not only has staff been working on this for a long time, there's a lot of community members that have been alongside us since 2016. So a lot of effort and thought has come in to be where we are today. So in 2018, we hit the pause button, decided that it was important to develop a comprehensive plan first. And that's important so we have a vision, so our regulations are there to put into place through ordinance what the overall vision for growth that the community wants to see in Charlotte. So we paused the UDO at that time while we worked on that, on the comprehensive plan. And we went through a few text amendments, TOD being a very important one, because this really served as a template for what the future UDO would look like. So the TOD was passed in 2019, and then we went through some alignment rezonings in 2020. You can go to the next slide. And so this is, since we released the first draft on October 27th, just wanted to hit a couple of the highlights. We spent a good deal of time with the community from October through June to really understand what the community concerns were and even start presenting what we anticipated as some recommendations for changes in the draft to make sure that the community really understood what it is that we were proposing to change as we work through these drafts. We had a public hearing in July and released a second draft with staff recommended changes on July 14th. We went to Planning Committee on July 19th, and we will be releasing the adoption draft on the 15th. These are just a few highlights, but I wanted to point out too that we've had a number of opportunities to come before the Planning Committee, the Planning Commission, had many ordinance advisory committee meetings, particularly since that's been in effect since 2016. Had a number of engagement, more than 50 engagement opportunities for including office hours where you can come and talk to staff about any topic that you'd want to talk about. And we've had many presentations in front of you all as well. And I just want to thank City Council in particular for taking the time. We had 3 special meetings where we really sat down and dove into some issues. And I just want to thank Council for that opportunity to be able to do that. I think it was a very important part of the process. And for now, I want to turn it over to Laura, and she's going to talk through a summary of the staff recommended changes to the second draft.
Thank you, Allison. Since we were last in council, we have recommended changes to the public hearing draft and provided a summary of those. You should have a table in the materials you received for this meeting. It's also on our website. And that goes through the article numbers, where you can find the changes, and the topic, the description, the change, and the purpose of the change. So we have made a number of changes. Next slide. That went to the Planning Committee of the Planning Commission and that have ended up in their recommendation that becomes the adoption draft. So as you also look through the draft, you can see that there are changes from the first draft to the public hearing or second draft, and those are shown in red strike through and blue underline. Changes that we have recommended since the public hearing or second draft are highlighted in green. So as you can see on the slide, there was a lot done between the first and second draft, but we've also continued to make changes and refinements based on feedback to the second or public hearing draft. Next slide. A little bit on what we heard on that second draft is we received 290 new comments on that draft, and that's compared to over 1,200 on the first draft. We made 70 minor changes to the public hearing draft. They may have been substantive in some cases. In other cases, they were fairly small changes for clarification. We don't think any of the changes we made altered the intent or the direction of the UDO, but were really fine-tuning. The kind of changes that really altered the intent and direction were between the first and second draft. And so we had corrections, minor non-substantive changes, and minor substantive changes. And I'll just take you through a few examples so you'll know what we've done since you all have seen the draft. We deleted incorrect text. This was just a correction that, in this case, this was related to the conservation residential development option being able to be used with voluntary mixed income. And we thought something had been deleted and it hadn't, and we went back and corrected that. Next slide. Some minor non-substantive changes. We'd gotten feedback that we needed to recognize those with those pedestrians with disabilities who require assistive devices. So we added that definition. We don't think it changes the substance of the ordinance, but we did think it was important to add that into the draft. Next slide. And then we had some minor substantive changes, some examples of adjustments to setbacks. We heard that in some cases our setbacks appeared to be larger than they needed to be. We went back and looked through that. We agreed in some cases, not all cases, and so we did adjust some setbacks to be more consistent with the districts for which they were provided. A couple more, if we go to the next slide. We added specific targets for the affordable housing development allowances. So you can see the affordability period of 30 years, minimum number of units, and the percentage of development at different AMIs. And this was to provide clarity. You may not remember what was in before, but we basically referenced an administration document, and we've tried to now provide the specifics with one example that we're still working on for that 3C that will, you can go ahead, sorry. And then we added specific uses for the research campus zoning district. Previously, we had talked about research campus as a use, but we thought for clarity that it would be better to add the specific uses allowed in the district, and we have gone through and done that. Next slide. So back to Allison on the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Laura. As I mentioned earlier, we went before Planning Committee on July 19th. Per interlocal agreement, the Planning Committee is the official recommending body to City Council for planning initiatives. They recommended approval unanimously with one change that they requested that a conditional rezoning for gas stations and vehicle repair shops would be required in any zoning district where they're allowed. So that will be in the adoption draft that will come out on Monday. Next slide. So as I've said a couple times, adoption draft, it will come out on the 15th. So it'll reflect this recommendation. We are coming back before you all on August 22nd, request a council vote on the UDO. And if adopted, it would be effective on June 1st. The delay, that time period is really intended to make sure that staff is, fully understands the UDO and they're ready to administer that. It also helps us to go into the public and make sure the public is informed and educated on the changes. Also allows us to do things like Excella, update Excella, because we do have computer software systems that help us process all those things, and that also has to be updated as well. Hence the reason for having some additional time to kind of work through those things. We do anticipate we may have a text amendment even before the effective date. There's just some cleanup things that we found that are really non-substantive. They're really more just procedural and ways in which we can better administer the ordinance and be more effective. And then we certainly see, like Raleigh and other cities that have done major ordinance overhauls, that we're just going to find things along the way that will need to be adjusted, and we'll be coming back before you for regular text amendments. And as we've said, we consider this to be a living document, and then we'll continue to make changes, whether those are minor technical changes that people are getting stuck in permitting, or they're community issues that come out from other work that council is doing. So those will be coming before you, I think, over the next couple of years as they come up. After the UDO is adopted, then we will go into community area planning. And so we anticipate doing that over the next couple of years. And alongside the community area planning process, we will also be doing alignment rezonings to ensure the zoning that's in place aligns with what the place type is, and then making sure that we're confirming the place type through community area planning process. And I believe that is it. So next slide, I think, is the discussion slide, correct? Yep, that's it. So we are happy to answer any questions from council.
Thank you very much, Allison. I'm going to let Larkin handle the questions since he can see them there. I just first want to just make a comment. I'm really appreciative and cognizant of how much work this has been for our staff. You've got 12 people that you're listening to, in addition to the Planning Commission, in addition to the public, in addition to the OAC, and you all have been very responsive and have worked hard to hear people. Whether everybody has got what they want, I suppose if it was a document where everybody got what they want, we probably wouldn't have anything. So I will say that again on the 22nd, but I really am grateful for your hard work. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Larkin. Mr. Eggleston.
Larkin is fine. Yeah, I don't think anybody got everything they wanted, which means we probably got close to where we needed to be on this. Mr. Winston.
Thank you. Ms. Craig, the June 1st, 2023 implementation date, does this mean that rezonings will remain in this kind of purgatory state with status quo zoning districts trying to achieve Comp 2040 plan goals between now and then?
So we will continue to use the policy map, which is in effect now, and so we'll be looking towards the policy map for making future rezoning decisions. But we can't rezone to a zoning district that doesn't exist yet, and those zoning districts in the UDO will not exist until June 1. So we will be, I think we're continuing to evolve and move forward. I think having the policy map in effect is helping us to do that, but we can't actually rezone to a new district until it exists.
All right, so we'll be using the old, so that is correct. We will be using the old zoning districts until next summer.
Correct.
All right.
And Allison, can you repeat the reason why you need that amount of time? Why June is, is the date you've set for implementation?
Sure. It's a couple different things. It's really about making sure that the staff that we have are all educated on what has changed to be able to administer the ordinance effectively. As you recall, I think it was 2019, we established the Charlotte Development Center, sort of the one-stop shop, and that's really to provide predictability and efficiencies in permitting. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to be effective and efficient in that permitting. So I think it takes time for us to be able to get up to speed. It's also too making sure that we are educating the public and the development community and citizens as to what is in the document, so that when development projects are being brought forward, that they understand really how to design the plans. And then lastly, there is an important element of just even the Excel process in the background. So all of that has to be rewritten for the new permitting processes. So we've been working with IT, but they can't really get started on that work until the document is adopted and we know exactly what we're moving forward with. So there's a lot of IT work that has to be done in the background too, that they're ready to jump on, but that is a part of the process as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Watlington?
Thank you. I too am appreciative of the massive amount of work that's been done with the UDO. Certainly has been an extensive discussion. So kudos to staff on all of the work that you've done to get us to this point. By and large, I am hopeful about how the UDO turns our Comp 2040 plan into regulatory standards. I do have one amendment I'd like to offer for my fellow council members. As you all know, last year, one of the sources, if you will, of great debate in our community up until even today is this idea of how do we ensure that while we're trying to increase density in certain areas, that we're not doing it at the expense of our most vulnerable. And so to that end, as the Great Neighborhoods Committee has been focused on increasing neighborhood stabilization amid some of the things that are going on in our community, including massive corporate investment from other places in the nation, I'd like to offer up an amendment to the UDO for consideration for the committee and then obviously for the council. So, Madam Chair, if it's appropriate at this time, I'd like to offer that language to the committee.
Sure, you can offer the language. I don't think we're in a position to vote, though, but it would give everybody a chance to just listen to it. And I understand that our attorney is online as well. So is that okay? Do you want to just talk about the language? And then I just don't know how everybody feels about it until I guess the language is.
Yeah, let's maybe read the language and then see if because it may be that folks are like totally get it. We'll see where we shake out. If we're in a position to vote, that'd be great. If we want to chew on it for a little bit, understand that as well. So here is the language essentially. It would say make the effective date of allowing duplexes and triplexes in N1A through C, which are our lowest density zonings, to be 4 months after council adoption of an anti-displacement strategy. Therefore, the proposed language for a prescribed condition could be that they are not effective until 4 months after the adoption of an anti-displacement strategy. So that would be the adjustment in or the amendment, if you will, to the UDO, specifically that just for the duplexes and triplexes in N1A through C, that provision of the UDO would not be effective until 4 months after the adoption of the anti-displacement strategy. And the reasoning behind that is obviously because the key issue or concern that we've constantly heard from our constituents is for areas that are with relatively cheaper land across the city. What we've seen in terms of implementation across the nation of these types of densification is that it does have impacts to accelerating displacement. And so we'd like to make sure that our anti-displacement strategy is completed and adopted so that we understand the true implications and that we can make sure that that our UDO reflects what seems to be the general consensus among council, is that we want to make sure that we're delivering win-wins and equity across the city in the best way that we can. So that is the spirit behind the language. So I'd offer that to the committee.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
may I ask a question of one of staff and one of Ms. Watlington? For staff, whoever's the appropriate person to field it, what is the, I guess, current target date for the committee that's working on the anti-displacement strategy? What is the maybe projected date that something would come to the next council from there?
Well, I'm not sure if, I'm sorry, I came a little late. I'm not sure if Sean Heath is in the room, but I will tell you that we're trying our best from a Great Neighborhoods Committee to match that summer completion date in terms of recommendations out of NEST.
Go ahead.
I can share a little bit about the status of Nest Commission and the plan to bring forward an anti-displacement strategy. Again, Rebecca Hefner, Housing and Neighborhood Services. We're working right now with the Nest Commission. They are bringing their work plan forward to Great Neighborhoods next week, and then we'll be working with that commission and staff on a more formal anti-displacement strategy, which we would plan to bring forward to council late spring, early summer of 2023.
And my question for Ms. Watlington specifically, I guess, would be, would there be, and I'll say just for speaking only as myself, I would like us to have the opportunity to talk with each other and talk with staff more than this current meeting might allow, but before a vote. But I certainly agree with the objective of mitigating displacement impacts. I guess my question for you is, would you be open to considering a date on the back end of that amended language that says on or before X date, so that there's I guess, if the expectation is that this work is going to come forward to the council in spring, summer, that there would not be the possibility of the implementation of the UDO being delayed further than like fall or winter of next calendar year at the latest. Does that make sense? Like whichever comes first, either the council adopts the anti-displacement strategy and your 4-month clock or whatever it ends up being starts then, or December 31st, 2023, or whichever comes first, that kind of language.
So for me, the concern there is, I think the other end of the spectrum is that we don't get the work done and then we end up in the situation where we would be in the case that we don't have an anti-displacement strategy developed and this goes into effect. The whole intent is to make sure that the anti-displacement work is done before the effective date. So for me to say, we're going to do this regardless by X date, it decouples it from the intent in that we want to make sure that the anti-displacement strategy is adopted first.
So
yeah, that makes sense. I think the other way to look at that for me would be that the on or before whatever date creates additional incentive to get that work done, because otherwise, and I don't foresee this happening, but it theoretically could, that the council is unable to or unwilling to work towards a adopted strategy, and then it's just this open-ended situation where the UDO never goes into effect. So
I definitely get where you're coming from, and I would say that I think it's really the ends of both spectrum. It could also be that the council is, to your point, unwilling, and then we end up putting it into effect without any anti-displacement strategies at all. So the hope, obviously, is that we continue this work and we accelerate it. But the key piece for me is that we are adopting it and we're comfortable with our anti-displacement strategy before it goes into effect.
thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem, I know you had something you wanted to say, and then our two visiting council members also had wanted to weigh in on this as well, once
On
you're.
this? Okay. And I would like maybe staff and if Teresa's online, just to weigh in on it, just to, so that, I mean, because in theory, I like the idea, but I do want some kind of a date in there so, you know, both sides know what we're dealing with. But I guess I'd like to have the opportunity to hear from staff or our attorneys about that.
I'll jump in and then I'll turn it over to Teree. I think we would feel more comfortable with the date as well. You know, I understand what Councilmember Watlington's saying for sure, but I am confident that we'll get the work done. Rebecca and Sean and I have been working very closely on this. But I also understand that there's some legal concerns too with that maybe Teree can articulate.
While she's coming up, I will just say that I did have this conversation with Teree earlier today, and I liken it unto the abortion bans across America, right? They indicated that upon some action by the Supreme Court, in this case, reversal of Roe v. Wade, that those bans would then go into effect 30 days after that. And so there was a contingency written into the law. So the law was on the books, but it was contingent upon an action and not a particular date. So that was the basis upon which to build this particular language. So there's certainly a precedent.
We don't think Ms. Hagler-Gray has audio, unless she proves otherwise. I know Mr. Winston has got a question on this topic, and then Ms. Ajmera and Mr. Driggs had comments or questions as well.
Yes, I am not in favor of tying any additional delay to implementation, so I would not be supportive of any kind of measure that further delayed. I think we have to be honest with ourselves, and is that any further delay will continue the optimized conditions for displacement. So I understand we want to continue to find ways to prevent involuntary displacement of our residents in all parts of the city. I would propose that the Comp 2040 plan and the UDO in itself is a strong representation towards work for anti-displacement. It is not the end-all be-all of the work. I've talked to Ms. Watlington about this, and I would definitely be open to finding a way to tie the completion of the anti-displacement work up to make sure it gets done and make sure recommendations and any additional changes that are needed are considered in this living document of the UDO. But we shouldn't, I think it would be kind of disingenuous to tell our constituents that we are delaying something to try to prevent displacement when current conditions are optimized for involuntary displacement. I just want council to make sure that we're having a clear conversation about that and not, you know, messaging something that isn't necessarily going to be effective. Delay is not going to delay displacement. So we got to kind of continue to push forward. Thank you.
Ms. Ajmera?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I understand displacement concerns that Ms. Watlington has raised. I'd like to see the language. I know she read through it, but I'd like to see a hard copy and really take time to review it and how it all ties together. Because I'm not really clear on how it all will work once the recommendations are provided to the council by the Nest Commission. So I look forward to working with Ms. Watlington over the next week or so before the adoption on the 22nd. I do have something else, but I will wait on that topic after we discuss this.
And that's something else on the UDO update, or when we get to the comp plan implementation?
Yes, it's on the UDO.
Okay.
Yes, it's on the UDO. I just wanted Allison to walk us through the next steps. There have been concerns that many of you are aware about open space and green space overlap from the environmental community. And the real estate industry has also raised concerns around density and project viability. And both sides have valid concerns. And I have talked with Allison and her team. They have done extensive work on this and there is certainly further analysis that is needed to address the concerns that's been raised. So I just wanted to understand the next steps and the timeline and what it would look like after the UDO is adopted.
Mr. Vice Chair, could we finish the prior conversation? We're going off in a different direction.
Is that all right, Ms. Ajmera?
Yes, we can come back
Okay.
to that, and that's what I was suggesting
Yeah,
earlier.
perfect. Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, sir. For one, I wanted to add my congratulations to Allison and the staff, and in particular to say to Allison that the UDO is in a much better place since you took over, and I appreciate your work. To Ms. Watlington, I really appreciate that suggestion. I think what it does, for one, is it adds weight to the work of the Anti-Displacement Commission, because now there's something tied to what they're doing that is material. The danger with something like that is they do a lot of work, they come up with recommendations, and then it's not clear what force those recommendations have or how they would modify the UDO. So, and I think there is a real risk, in spite of what Mr. Winston says, that by putting it in place and allowing these duplexes and triplexes without reference to the findings, you will probably have exactly the opposite of what he says. I think those are going to start happening fast in the form of redevelopment of vulnerable neighborhoods and high-cost new structures being put in there. The duplexes and triplexes are not going to be affordable. And the question is, what is going to be removed to make way for them? And I think we know that because of HOAs and deed restrictions, the most likely targets are exactly these neighborhoods. So the biggest concern during our 2040 conversations even was that we could have an unintended adverse consequence because of the vulnerability of certain neighborhoods. So frankly, I really appreciate Ms. Watlington's suggestion. I don't want to undermine it by agreeing with you, Victoria, but I think that I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, yes, do we have to put some discipline around it? I'm assuming, of course, that there is no thought that if the Nest Commission did finish its work early, say, then you might have a situation where they had come out with their findings a month or two before the effective date, in which case you would have the remainder of the 4 months before those provisions got put in place. And my last comment is this does not delay the implementation of the UDO. This postpones by a couple of months the specific feature of the duplexes and the triplexes in the N1 and the N2. There's a lot more to the UDO than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Driggs. So who from staff would like to address Ms. Ajmera's previous question?
I can do that. So, Councilmember Ajmera and I have had a couple discussions with this, and this has been an area that we've talked about a great deal with you all and with our economic consultants. And it sounds like we want to continue the conversation a little bit. So I think that we can continue to look to see, could we analyze this a little bit further, which I think we can do, and see if there's some minor modifications that we might be able to do down the road to both not prevent much needed housing in our community, but also be protective of the importance that open space and tree save have in our community. So I'm committed to looking at that a little bit further. There's another piece of that too, in that there's a fee in lieu in the ordinance as it's drafted today, that allows you to pay a fee for open space, and that's connected to county parks and recreation. And we've had a great relationship with the county, working through the UDO all along the way. And there's just a little bit more work to be done to determine what does that fee look like, what does dedication look like. And so I think all of those things can be done really by the end of this year. And so, well, we certainly have to have the fee for the open space and the work with the county done before the adoption date. So for sure that will be figured out before the effective date. So I know that will be determined within the next few months. So I think that we can continue to have the conversations and come back before you before the end of the year.
Does that address your question, Ms. Ajmera?
Yes, that does. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your continued commitment to address the concerns that's been raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ajmera. Mr. Winston?
Yes, Ms. Craig, I would like to see a different proposed effective date that is much closer than 10 months away. I would like to see how we get to a January 1st effective date. And if that is not tenable, I'd like to see a date in the first quarter. We really need to get pushing forward on these community area planning processes. Again, I just want to reiterate, the longer the status quo is upheld, the longer that conditions are optimized for involuntary displacement in this city, in all place types. The status quo will continue to disallow more housing to be built, and will incentivize less housing to be built. You know, those McMansions that are going up, as opposed to housing that can be of diverse price points, that will continue for another year until we start the planning processes. And I think that's insufficient. So I would really like to see us push for a January 1st effective date, with, you know, the opportunity to consider maybe something later in the first quarter. But June 1st is not sufficient.
Ms. Craig, do you want to speak to how y'all arrived at the June 1st date and whether something earlier would be achievable?
Sure, and I wanted to clarify one important part of Councilmember Winston's comment, that after the UDO is adopted is when we'll be able to start working through community area planning. So we wouldn't be waiting to begin the community area planning till after the UDO effective date. And so at the point in which the UDO is effective, then we can start going into the community and start connecting the dots for the residents about place types and what is allowed in the place types, what your potential zoning district could be, what you could potentially do in those. So all that work can be kicked off upon UDO adoption and does not have to wait till the UDO effective date. The June 1 date, I mean, that really came, so every week, Laura Harmon, who's the UDO project manager, and Shannon Fry, who oversees the Charlotte Development Center, we meet with respective staff to talk about UDO implementation and what it's going to take to get there. And there's a lot of work behind the scenes. And I would say, if anything, that date is driven by the Charlotte Development Center and making sure that they have all the pieces in place to be able to administer the ordinance. And so we've worked very closely with Shannon and the other departments that are involved in the development center to get to that date. And so I think it's really staff driven to make sure that we're ready internally, and that we've gone through and we've updated Excella and changed those software pathways. So that's really where that's come from. And that's how we arrived at that date. I mean, we certainly would like to be sooner, but I think that was the realistic date that we came to from the staff perspective.
So are we saying that staff does not think an earlier implementation date, effective date, is tenable? Is that the response?
I can have a conversation with Laura and Shannon and see if we could move it a little bit earlier, but I don't think that January 1 is an option. It's also challenging just to being able to communicate to the public through the holidays of a major change that's occurring I can talk to them to see if it might be something that we could do a little bit earlier than June. But it wouldn't be as early as January. We won't be able to, we just won't be ready to administer it by then.
Thank you.
Ms. Watlington?
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back because I wanted to make sure that I was clear in terms of the committee and our additional council members' appetite for moving forward with working on the amendment recommendation that I have proposed. It sounds like folks aren't ready to take action on it today, but I just wanted to affirm that there was a general willingness to work on that. I do want to clarify that the language that I provided did come from legal, so just want to make sure that folks are clear that that is what has been presented as an opportunity to provide that language. Certainly, they can provide more detail over the next week in terms of what that can mean, but I just want to make sure that that's clear, that we can do it. There is a way to get it set up. And I did just want to reiterate some of Councilmember Driggs' comments because he's absolutely correct, and I would challenge some of the comments that were previously made about the status quo being optimized for gentrification. We know based on the data where this has been implemented that actually densification has been proven to drive accelerated gentrification in the most vulnerable areas. So to suggest that by implementing this without regard to an anti-displacement strategy that we're doing people a service is completely and totally false based on the data. So I just want to make sure that we're not promising people something that by and large, most of those that have in terms of development in our city. So I want to be clear that what we're trying to do is ensure that we aren't accelerating anti-displacement, and the data that we have from other cities shows that that's exactly what this does without a linkage to anti-displacement. So I just want to be clear about that because I don't want a message track out there presented that by somehow trying to tie densification to anti-displacement that we're working against affordability. That's absolutely ludicrous. So anyway, I'd like to just have a understanding. I think what I'm hearing is that people are interested in working on this amendment, but I just wanted to close the loop on that conversation before we went to the next point.
I think that's
Yeah,
accurate.
can I just add a comment to that, Ms. Watlington? I think we have to remember that this is a document that's going to dictate how things are built for the next few decades. I hope that it won't be that long before we update the comp plan and the UDO again, but we really have to remember this is about the long game, and I think getting it right is important. I do support continuing to work on it. I think it's a really interesting idea. We won't take an official vote, but I think what Ms. Watlington is saying is if she's going to continue to work on it, everybody needs to see the language, ask their questions, and we can do that offline.
Yep.
And get to a place. And the only thing I ask of all council members is that if this comes to an amendment that is legally enforceable, that everybody knows what they want to do with it going into September 22nd or August 22nd, so that we're not debating it on the dais. This is our opportunity to work together, talk to each other, and figure out if this meets your needs. So I would look forward to doing that.
And Ms. Watlington, you're going to share that language with the council members?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, that was all our speakers if we want to move to item number 2.
Yep, that's great. We'll go on. Allison, go ahead with the 2040 comp plan.
We have a lot of echoes going on right now. Is it good to keep going? Okay. So I'll just kick this off before I turn it over to Alicia and to Robin. I know we've spent a lot of time talking about the UDO over the last year, but there's been a lot of things going on too with the comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan, of course, was adopted by council on June 21st of 2021, and staff has been working on a number of different things that are involved in implementing that. And so Alicia and Robin are here to share some of the work that they've been doing, expecting to have an annual report to highlight some of these things, a dashboard to help you and the community understand how we're tracking and accomplishing the goals of the comprehensive plan, as well as some other smaller stakeholder work that we've been doing. So with that, I will turn it over to Alicia.
Thanks, Allison. If you can advance the next slide, please. Thank you. So Allison pretty much touched on a lot of kind of my talking points about it, but again, council adopted the plan in June of last year. It's only been a year, but definitely a year full of work on the staff side and definitely through council. We talk a lot about the comp plan being a living document. And so what Robin will talk about today, she's our program manager for our implementation group. Before the plan was adopted, we knew we needed someone dedicated and a team of folks dedicated to implementation of the comp plan. So Robin's been heading up a group of staff that have dedicated their everyday work to implementing the comp plan. And so she's going to share that work today that's about taking that idea around a living document and how she's worked with the team to put it into action. It's definitely a collaboration across the entire organization, and she'll share what that looks like and what those tangible documents and work products look like. Also, she'll share about 3 groups that council kind of directed staff to really involve the community on. That's around anti-displacement, equitable infrastructure, as well as looking at how do we define what community benefits? What does that mean for Charlotte? Not the agreement, but just in general, the idea and what can we do to advance community engagement and development process. So with that, if you can advance to the next 2 slides, please. Keep going. That one, I'll turn it over to Robin. Thank you.
Thank you. So with the comp plan implementation, the image you see on the screen, this is everything that we're doing. We're looking at the short-term actions. We have community area mapping. Obviously, the UDO is part of this. Anti-displacement tools in association with NEST and some other items. But specifically, we're going to be talking about how we track our process first. And so, next slide, please. This graphic, I really wanted to share with you guys first before we go into the individual pieces on the annual report and the implementation dashboard, because this discusses how it all works together. And so the 2040 plan set out the policies that we need in order to achieve the goals and reach the vision. What we have yearly after that is we have an annual report, which is going to report out on the policies that have actually been enacted to date. And then the dashboard itself will measure the data, which will tell us if those policies are being effective or not. And so this is a process and a feedback loop that will keep working. And the next time we look at the comp plan, we'll have all of that data to help us figure out maybe what needs to be tweaked. But keep this in mind as we go through the rest of this presentation. Next slide. All right, so we're going to start with our annual report. So the annual report will be published yearly. We'll probably go by fiscal year since the comp plan was adopted at the end of June. And so at the end of each fiscal year, we are going to catalog what we've done over the last year and then put it in this report. This is intended for everybody. So the public can read it. We made sure that it'll be helpful for appointed officials, elected officials, neighborhoods, and everybody. Currently, it's broken up into 3 pieces. So our vision, this is just the reestablishing of what the vision is of the comp plan, guiding principles, and what our goals are. The next piece is our progress. That's where we focus and we talk about the policies, which ones were enacted, which ones are in progress. Specifically, in this annual report and the next couple subsequent ones, we're focusing on the policy recommendations that were short-term. We have, I think, 55 short-term policies that were identified. So that's what you'll see in this first report. And it'll tell us where we are on those, which ones have been completed, which ones are completed and ongoing, which ones are in progress, and then which ones are forthcoming. And then the last piece, we have it labeled as our path forward. That's where we're going to highlight a couple of projects that we know are going to make big strides in that next fiscal year, so we know what to look forward to. The next piece is our implementation dashboard, and this is where the data comes into play. The objective of this is to track the policy objectives for each of the 10 plans, the 10 goals. So in our plan, we have 10 goals, and under each goal, we have objectives. Each objective is written so that we have a metric that measures that objective. That is all in the manuals and metrics document that we have online as well, if you guys want to see all of it. But for this first year, we focused on developing the dashboard based on what we had available, and that's about 25% of those metrics. So we put them all together. We have them coupled per goal. It is visualized by NPA area, the neighborhood planning areas. And what we have now, like I said, this past year was just to develop what this dashboard is going to look like. Over the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to be looking at how do we get the other 75% of the data. And so we'll be looking at those. And each year you see this dashboard will be updated with new data. Now we're going to switch to the community benefits conversation. So this slide shows the committee support that Alicia mentioned. We have NEST focusing on anti-displacement. The foundation for this work is existing programs that Housing and Neighborhood Services already have. We have the Charlotte Equitable Development Commission. Again, this is based on existing procedures with CIP, and council created both of those. For community benefits, there was a lot of conversation during the comp plan adoption about what exactly community benefits are, how can we better support our neighborhoods. And so council directed us to put together a task force because there was no foundational work for this. And so really what the task force focused on over the past year was creating that foundation for work. Next slide. We wanted to put this in here so we can visualize how this works together with the other committees. We have NEST focusing on anti-displacement. The CEDC will focus a lot on public infrastructure. And then the task force, the Community Benefits Task Force, we look at social programs, economic programs, P3s, but we also touch on the public infrastructure and the anti-displacement piece. And with that, I will share that staff that supports all 3 of these meet monthly so that we make sure that we're coordinating and connecting on all of these. This is a big one. Everyone asks me this. After a year, what exactly is a community benefit? So we have a definition. This is going to go in our community benefits lookbook, which is that foundational work. But this is what we agreed to. Again, this is a definition that tries to encompass everything that could be considered a community benefit across the city, while recognizing that different neighborhoods have different needs. And so we can't possibly create something very specific that'll fit everybody. In the lookbook itself, we also have a list of examples of what that actually looks like. In some neighborhoods, it might be something as simple as a sidewalk. In others, it's job support and things like that. Next slide. And so what we've done over the past year, we had 4 workshops with our task force. The task force is made up of neighborhood representatives, the development community, and various staff from across the city that have come and participated as well. And we had open discussions about what exactly is going on in the city. There were some tense conversations at times, but we got through and we had a good outcome. But what we've put together is the Community Benefits Lookbook, and that is part toolbox. So that's what are the available tools that we already have that people maybe don't know they have access to, how to use them. And then we have an action plan, and these are potential new policies, new engagement strategies, or new regulatory tools that we can look at over the next 1 year to 10 years to help improve the situation. Next slide. And so here you see, this is the draft cover of the Community Benefits Lookbook. We do have the background. Let me go through this real quick. We have the background and the purpose. And again, I just want to highlight, the purpose is not that as soon as this is out there, everything is in place right away. This is to give us that foundation so staff knows what to start looking at and what to work toward. We do have 20 plus existing tools. Some are city provided, some are not, and we have those outlined with links and resource contacts. And then we also have that action plan, like I said. All of the potential actions that were brought up by the task force are in there. Not all of them are being suggested to move forward due to timeline and feasibility and things like that. But we did want to represent everything that was suggested. And then we culminate that with our recommended action plan. And then with that, I will turn it back over to Alicia to talk about our schedule moving forward.
You all mentioned a lot about the work that's coming up in our planning area, including implementation of the plan. It's the community area planning process is the big body of work that we'll be taking on. We'll come back to this committee and to council to talk about what that schedule looks like, what that body of work will look like. But that will start, we've already started working internally on data collection and just really trying to get the process going. Our timeline, we're looking at to start in January. And that's to start working on the planning areas, the 15 planning areas, and to complete them hopefully within the next 2 years. We'll also work closely with our Unified Development Ordinance team to start implementing the UDO as well. So we're working how to make sure that those two documents talk to each other and that we're working with the community to understand how they fit together and hit the community at one time so they won't be confused about the two. So those are our big body of work. The other thing that we're excited to talk about, next slide please, is our Community Planning Academy. A lot of our current leadership was participated in this project in the Community Planning Academy. And what it is, it's a free educational program for those citizens who are interested in being more well-versed in the planning field. So we had about 156 applicants, lots of people, lots of interest. So we're trying to figure out how to staff all of that. So the first year, this cohort that starts in August will be around 31 people, but they'll participate in 5 modules around the history of planning, just transportation, zoning, urban design, all the key parts of our work. Next slide, please. So here are the numbers and where people are represented. So we know, we keep track of that, who's participating, who wants to participate, to make sure we have representation from throughout the community. That's part of the selection process. And then we also will have, thinking about next year, maybe doing it twice a year and some mini boot camps type of planning academy because the demand is so high, especially in light of our work with the comp plan. People are just interested in figuring out what we are working on, how this planning work, and what it means to them. So this is a really important tool for us to start to have that continuous and ongoing communication about planning in our community. Next slide. With that, we'll take questions.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you have any comments? I don't have anybody with a hand raised yet.
I do not. Alicia, thank you for that update, and Robin, we appreciate it. It's a lot of hard work that goes into this. So if we have no other questions from other council members as well?
Winston has a question.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Winston.
Maybe we could talk about this offline, because I'd just like to know a little bit more about the Planning Academy in terms of how it's set up, how it'll be, kind of taught, I guess. And maybe if there are future opportunities to do things like this using technology in a way that doesn't necessarily tie up staff time, and maybe make it available for more people.
Yep.
But maybe that's something.
Yeah, that's part of the plan, to actually record it and make it an online kind of ready-made package of information that people can have. So I know we'll be recording all of our classes to do that, to make sure the information is available. And also the presentations will be available and possibly with voiceover so folks can have that information.
Yeah, why don't we talk about it, because production quality is important in these types of things, and in many different ways that you can go.
And budget.
I've seen the best and worst of that on the government channel over the years.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And And Mayor Pro Tem, if there don't appear to be any other questions, I was going to take a moment of personal privilege to just thank you for your leadership on this committee as the chair over this past term, with this being this council's last meeting of this committee. You have done an incredible job of leading us through some of the heaviest lifts that this council has undertaken in the last 2.5 years on some of the most challenging topics. So kudos to you, and thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Eggleston. Appreciate that. Thank you for your help and for all of the participation of all of our committee members and council members. It's definitely a team effort. Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, second, aye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.